lot of money in there, beating some of the best legislators we have. We've got to protect our friends in the legislature, and we've got to gather a few more friends, and the only way we do that is in election years when we go out and let them know exactly how we feel and have them understand that we are expecting them to support the best we can do in education. They need your help, so don't hesitate to go talk to them and have them understand how important it is to you.
And also, I hope you understand that those three good Republican legislators who support education, who were defeated up there, were defeated by three people who are advocating vouchers.
Yeah.
We don't need vouchers.
What are the big differences between today and yesterday in terms of people? I think the legislative, we get it, right? But for the folk in the room, the folk you were encountering as you were going around, and the people who were reading your newspapers, what's the difference between Joe Blow today and their attitude around public education than what it was in 1982?
All right, take over on that.
Well, I think the public's attitude is shaped by so many different forces now, if I'm looking at it from a media perspective. Again, back in 1982, you didn't have talk radio. Obviously, you didn't have the internet. You didn't have social media. You didn't have blogs. And so there is a lot more misinformation out there and a lot less, as I said earlier, a lot less opportunity to kind of hone and focus the debate, because you've always got somebody who's going to be pouring some misinformation out there and spreading it around and all of that. So people are dealing with a lot more of that. I think that as far as the difference in the public's mindset, I think you have, in Mississippi, you're seeing the same thing as Governor Winter referenced earlier, as nationally. It's kind of, I'm tired of all this talk about, this is some element of the public. We need to spend more money. We need to do more for this. We've tried this, and it hasn't worked. That's a counter force that you're having to deal with out there politically. And Brad Dye, the Lieutenant Governor at the time of the Education Reform Act, said it so well, I think. I mean, he quoted others as saying it. Education Reform Act hasn't made us #1 in the country, but just think of where we'd be if we hadn't had it.
Yeah, that was me who told him that.
Huh?
I told him that.
You told him, well, yeah, okay. You're the one, so he's quoting you. And and that is the way. We have so much farther to come than others have, and we have come a long way. And regardless of where we are now, I'm absolutely convinced we wouldn't be anywhere close to the progress we've made without the Education Reform Act. But I think there is that sense of I don't want my taxes raised for anything. I don't want this idea that any government spending is going to be wasteful and inefficient. I think that's an attitude that you're battling now. That maybe it's hard for me to imagine a general tax increase like funded the Education Reform Act passing today. I think the political environment has changed, even though that was a tougher time as far as race and public education is concerned. Today may be a tougher time in terms of whether my taxes are raised or not.
Andy, you want to talk?
Well, I agree. What he said, I think it is a tough time now. And not only in K-12, but in higher education, we're seeing many policymakers of the more conservative bent are saying maybe it's time to let corporations run things that the government used to run. Corporations can do it better. For-profit charter schools, for instance, it's time to let them give it a try. Government has failed. Government schools have failed. And it's time, and not only, that's also in higher ed. We're seeing a lot of that, attacks on public higher education as being too expensive, having failed, and let's see what corporations can do. I know there's many ultra-conservatives who support some of these training programs where legislators are invited to come and see how corporations can do a better job than government can at various things. And I just see that today. Along with, there's also what we recognize to be an anti-intellectualism kind of sweeping across the nation, especially at the higher education level. An attitude toward research that is kind of bitter and it's frivolous. And if business can't gain from it, then it's wasted. Academic research is really wasted. It needs to be transferable research so that business can make money off of it. And in a way, that's dangerous for those of us who advocate public education at all levels. But they don't take when we say, like in the film there, when I said, you know, Mississippi's history, you know, expecting us to climb out of that deep, dark hole where we have been for 250 years, expecting us to climb out of that and turn things around immediately when we still have a high percentage of our children that are in at-risk environments, that are poverty. Poverty does devastating things to kids. And we have the highest poverty rate still in the United States. So many of our kids are coming to school from terrible environments. And that a recent study had to do with children from high poverty, generational poverty, and the stress put on them by daily living. The tremendous stress that those kids are under. And they did a study to see how those some 14% that make it out of that terrible, stressful situation, why did they make it out? What was it that helped them succeed where others just cannot make it out of that environment? And most of the time they found it was an intervention by somebody, and you know who it was most of the time?
A teacher.
A teacher, exactly. A teacher intervened to relieve that stress to help that child who had some other characteristics, the grit factor that's hard to define, but nevertheless, I mean,
And Andy, that's not getting any better. I heard on the radio driving over this morning that the new Annie Casey Kids Count report shows that poverty among Mississippi children has gone from 30% 5 years ago to 34% today. 34% of our kids live in poverty.
Poverty matters. Governor Winter, talk to us a little bit about the state of race relations in Mississippi today.
Depends on where you want to start. I like to believe that we've come a very, very long way in race relations in Mississippi. I remember those bad days in the 40s and 50s, and we're still paying a price for that. But at the same time, I think we can take a great amount of pride in the progress that we have made. I had the privilege of serving on President Bill Clinton's National Advisory Board on Race, along with several other Americans, including Dr. John Hope Franklin, the distinguished African-American historian. I went to 26 states. I went all over the country. I went to South Los Angeles and San Francisco and South Chicago and New York City and Boston and Miami and Houston, Texas and Mount Bayou, Mississippi, and places all over. Total panorama of race relations. And I came out of that experience believing that Mississippi has a great deal it can teach the rest of the country. With the highest African American population of any state in the nation, we have always lived close together. We lived in a segregated society, and that was wrong. Now we live in a post-segregated society, but we still are not living together as human beings as much as we must. And so building trust between the races and finding the common areas that we agree on and recognizing that we're all in this together. Mississippi, I think, can teach the rest of the country how to build a model biracial or multiracial society. I've been associated with the group up at Ole Miss, the Institute for Racial Reconciliation. And that organization is already being looked to for leadership out of the state. In New Orleans, in South Carolina, in Crawford, Missouri, in places that have had a lot of very serious racial problems, we have been able to help them work through some of those problems. I think that if we will just understand that we all come from the same background. It hadn't been the same background. Obviously, those who are African Americans have come from a much more difficult background than we white folks have. But the opportunities right now for everyone ought to be the same. And we've got to help each other reach those goals. And I think public education is one of the best ways we do it. I think the more that we go to school together, the more we find a base for a unified society. So I feel good about where we are in terms of where we've come from. But I do recognize that there's danger of slipping back. And here again, we can't afford to lose any of the ground that we've gained. We've got to look at each other as friends and neighbors, sharing the same aspirations. One thing I learned out of that experience on the Clinton Commission, there are some things that all of us agree on. I don't care what we look like, what race we come from, where we live. There are some things all of us agree on. Wherever I went, South Los Angeles or Mississippi or Boston, and one day and 1 week I went from a meeting in Mount Bio, Mississippi, to a meeting in Faneuil Hall in Boston on race relations. And the issues were the same. They were exactly the same. This is what people agreed on. They wanted their children to get the best education they could. Nobody disagreed on that. They wanted a fair shot at a job that would sustain them and their family. They wanted to live in a decent house on a safe street. And above all else, they wanted to be treated with dignity and respect. Now, why can't we come together around accomplishing those objectives and not letting these little old superficial things about what we look like or what clubs we belong to or what church we belong to, what party we belong to? Why can't we come together behind a national commitment that we will see that those objectives that everybody agrees are worthy objectives, that those objectives are attained? And I believe we can do that.
Thank you. If in the audience you have a question, please pass it forward to us. We have a question from the audience, and I think this is for you, Dr. Mullins. What do you think realistically the state of Mississippi can do to attract and retain quality teachers? Many move to surrounding states for better pay.
Well, I don't know whether you know Mark Tucker or not, but he just published a report on what a couple of Scandinavian countries do with their teaching profession. And they're highly selective in their teachers as far as their scholarship, but they pay them like a doctor, a medical doctor's paid. They are way up on the esteem ladder. They're respected by all. And we're not going to do that, of course, anytime soon in the United States. I hope one day we'll do that. But we simply got to pay teachers more. I mean, our starting salaries are just not attractive to compete with those who are majoring, who can, engineering right now. You graduate from University of Mississippi in engineering, you can probably find a job very easily now, starting at $50,000 plus. When I try to recruit teachers for the Mississippi Teacher Corps, they have to be liberal arts majors. They have to have a major in the sciences, math, English, social studies. And when I try to recruit those who I'm competing with, who pay so much more, it's almost impossible. I mean, but I'll tell you what, I'll give you an example of how just a little bit of extra money makes a difference. In the Teacher Corps, they committed to 2 years in teaching in high schools and junior highs where I send them. They have to go where I send them, and they have to go to a high-risk district. And after 2 years, they have their master's free. They'll teach where I send them for 2 years. Many of them really tough schools. And so what I find is that a lot of them want to leave after that 2 years. And you know what helps them stay? We've gotten some private money that we've raised from foundations, Bill Hardin Foundation, one of them. And if you teach math and you stay in a high-risk district, we'll give you a $3,000 bonus. Now that's just from the Mississippi Teacher Corps. That has turned some around. We used to have our third-year percentage of staying in teaching in Mississippi in a high-risk district. Was around 30%. Now it's up to close to 50% just because